Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them so you can build it yourself.
This episode of the Predictable Revenue Podcast is brought to you by our sales coaching and consulting services. Are you looking to create repeatable, scalable, and predictable revenue? We've helped thousands of companies grow their business with tailored expert advice backed by testing to ensure they establish the best practices that will work for them. Head over to bit.ly/predictable coaching to learn more.
Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm your host, Collin Stewart. Today, I'm joined by Dom and Ajinkya. They're from Trellus, and we're going to talk product market fit. Guys, welcome to the show.
Excited to be here.
Happy to be here.
I always love talking product market fit. I know we've got this kind of weird overlap of the audience of like founders and salespeople, or kind of founders leading sales. And this is the kind of, I think, a really important overlap in the Venn diagram. I think one of the biggest things that a lot of companies I talk to struggle with is maybe jumping to sales or jumping to go to market before they have really, really tight, really strong product market fit. And I'm excited to have you guys share your story because you kind of had a version of that. And so why don't we start with, Ajinkya, talk to me about the original idea behind Trellus.
For sure. So I guess the origination story of where we come from is we were a bunch of, MIT research engineers. We had no experience in SaaS. My past experience was as a consultant. My co-founder, Craig's, he was building autonomous jets for Boeing. So, not a lot to do with building software for, salespeople. So we came with sort of no experience, just, eyes blind. We're just going to see what could happen. But we did have a couple of beliefs about what would happen in the world, specifically one that was, AI models are going to get faster. They're going to get smaller so that, you can run them on, people's machines. You can run them very fast in the cloud. And most notably, you can apply them to, things like real-time audio or real-time voice. That was like the big insight that I think we had, which is, if you combine those two things, you can affect software into new modalities. So things like when people are talking, when people are chatting live, like anything like that can actually have a real-time impact. So that was the original idea. It then transformed into a billion different, specific things. So we started off with a Zoom coach that would tell you things like, hey, you should shut up right now, to, that part of the software still exists, but in a different form. But a Zoom coach.
I might need that myself.
100%. All the way to things, where we were giving like exact scripts for what you should say during the call. I think our big lesson on that was we necessarily weren't the experts, especially in the workflow. And so if you're a founder that comes from that perspective, the biggest thing you can do is, have some opinions about where the technology is going, and then make sure you index on conversations more than anything else. Our big number one mistake, and it's probably wasted 4 to 5 months, was being too cerebral, sitting at our desks and just thinking, hey, what if this? What if like we did this? Would this help these people? And that's basically the thing that solved it is we started just messaging as many people on LinkedIn that we could, capping out our connection requests every week, making sure we had at least, 20, 30 conversations with people in different verticals, and going into those calls, with some level of an opinion, but just trying to hear what they do and then piecing it together. And that was for us like the big unlock, which is, it turns out you can just message like 1,000 people on LinkedIn and 100 people will probably be open to talking to you if you're a founder, just to give you feedback on your idea. And you can just start from there. So that's like step one. And then since then, now Trellus is a lot more focused on the call space, specifically around, making you get more dials, getting you more conversions on those dials. And that's how the business has transformed. But, started with the idea, AI and voice. And then how we got to there was we just talked to, honestly, probably thousands and thousands of people who've helped make that idea come true along the way.
Nice. I will add, because I've done a number of versions of this, especially on the LinkedIn outreach. And as the founder, you definitely get a boost over if you're a salesperson or a sales title. I have done outreach on LinkedIn where I got crickets. And I think that's an indication of nobody's interested in this thing.
Sure.
I've also done outreach where I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about, X problem. And people are like, oh, hell yeah, let's talk about it. Did you experience any of the crickets, or was it always just up on the right? Or are you just like, someone like everybody's like, I want to connect with this guy?
I think it actually ended up being like almost persona based. And this is maybe why we ended up in sales to an extent, which is, if you probably message 100 or 1,000 directors of engineering, you're probably not going to get a response on LinkedIn, unless you have like a title that they cared for, or like got a background that they cared for. You're just like likely not to get a response. I think with salespeople, they were just like open to talking to us. Like salespeople like chronically live on LinkedIn, like I do now, but like they are chronically online on LinkedIn because that's where they're doing their sales anyways. And they're just like always open to checking out new things. So in a way, maybe the sampling of who ended up responding to us like drove us towards sales. And we also ended up like liking or enjoying talking to salespeople. So it was a great match. But I think there's a lot of wisdom in what you said, which is, if you are hellbent on, building for a specific industry, so you are like, I am going to build tools for engineers, my approach is probably not going to work for you. Your approach is probably go to a developer conference and try to talk to people there. It's not going to be like LinkedIn message them because, they're not going to respond on LinkedIn. But yeah, I think there's a lot of like wisdom in like, if you are agnostic specifically to the persona that you really want to build for, and you just want to learn, message every persona and then see what bites and, go from there.
And I think I love the call out that it's not just going to be like if salespeople are the most likely or we're the most people that responded. It's not just that salespeople were the most interested. It's just they're the most accessible through LinkedIn. If you are targeting different types of founders or different types of personas, you're going to have to go use the channels that they're most comfortable with. Exactly. And developers is probably Hacker News or something like that. You post and do a show HN kind of deal.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm curious about the validation process. So you reach out to hundreds of people, thousands of people, you get, 30 conversations, 40, 100 conversations. What do those conversations look like? I love that you came in with an open mind. Tell me about it.
Yeah. So first, the way I looked at it is first 10 conversations was literally learn what they do in their day. Right. The way someone explained to me, if you're building a startup, is your product should either be used 100 times a day or should be used once a year. And like if you're a once a year product, it's basically you do some mission critical thing, like they file their taxes for you. And like it cannot be messed up. They're going to use software for it, but like they don't care about it when it's not tax season. But otherwise, if you're using product like 100 times a day, it's just something that like makes it part of their workflow. And so the things we were really listening for are like, okay, I am doing this activity every single day for like X amount of hours. It was an activity that you're maybe doing once in a blue moon. Didn't interest us. So that was like the first 10 calls is, getting that vocabulary of like, what are the actual like work aspects? So what is common across this industry? After that, you are building a company, so you can't just like be unopinionated. And so you come in with some level of opinions of, okay, I think I can improve these 5 things and have like this level of impact. And then you start testing people. You go into the call saying, hey, if you didn't have to do this anymore, what would that mean to you? Try to test price. You're like, what would you pay if this thing was solved for you? You really emphasize it in terms of, if you didn't have to do X anymore, what does it mean? Instead of, hey, I'm building a tool that does X, Y, Z. Will you pay me Z dollars for it? Because also to your face, everyone's gonna be like, yeah, sure, I'll pay you that. But like, they're not actually going to pay you it. You really need to understand, hey, if I like solve this for you, do you actually get time back? And like, that's the like goal you're looking for. And then the final aspect, which I think was helpful mostly from like being a technical founder standpoint, is you don't know until you know. And so you can like talk to as many people as you want, like theorize all day, or you could, at some point you have to have a gut instinct and say, cool, screw it, let's go, let's build something, put it in the hands of someone, see what happens, and then go from there.
Love it. And what did you hear initially in talk to me about the pain. Before we get into the kind of auto dialer side of things, let's talk about the kind of pain you heard on the call metrics. And then we want to bring Dom into the conversation and figure out how he entered the chat.
And Dom's perfect here because he was like one of the first people we actually like talked to, I guess, as part of these interviews. So there was a couple things. First, we started off with managers. So we started off with SDR managers, VPs of sales, trying to understand like what bothered them. To them, a lot of it was, I have a feeling that I should have more pipeline just because I know that there's this one rep that does the same amount of activities as the other reps on my team, but they just seem to always have 2x the number of meetings. Like that was like a universal truth you just hear. And that's because you have top performers, you have bottom performers on your SDR team. And like there was this consistent drive to understand, I don't know why this person is good. I know they're good. I don't know why they're good. I don't know how to make the 10th person on the team as good as them. If I could have 10 of this one person, all my pipeline problems, everything will be cured. I will like I'll be crushing quota. There's no worry about being fired. And remind you, this is like 2022 timeframe when everyone was worried I'm going to get fired, right? So like the thing on top of your mind is quota crushing. It's not like any L&D stuff. It's like, I want to crush quota. How do I crush quota? It's I get 10 of this one person to like be replicated. And so that's what we heard a lot. And I think it came down to like, how do you replicate behaviors? That was like our understanding of it, which is, like the whole coaching aspect. And that's how we like translated that, problem into a solution. There's of course like probably other ways you could have gone about it in terms of what does replication look like? Like, is it you literally just hire different people? You should do something else. But that was the way we took it effectively. And that was just like, I think top of mind then for everyone was literally, I don't want to get fired. We're not hitting quota as we did in 2020, 2021 anymore. So like, what the hell do I do? And unless your tool is literally giving me ROI in like a month or two, it's not worth my time because I may not be at this job in a month or two if I like don't, do something drastic right now. And so that was a lot of like how the conversations happened. So we started off there, and then the second part was talking to SDRs actually, right? Like you can build a tool all you want, but if the SDR is the one using it and you don't talk to them about like what's going on, you don't know what's going to happen. And so we started reaching out to SDRs at that point, trying to understand their workflow. That's when we reached Dom, and just like asked him a bunch of questions about like, how do you do your calls? Why do you think you're good? Like Dom crushed his quota. So we were like, why do you crush your quota? What do you think you're doing right? And then kind of went from there.
Just hammer the phone.
Just dump.
That's what I said.
Yeah. Tell us what kind of pains were you experiencing at the time when you first met the Trellus guys?
Yeah, well, I think, what initially got me like really excited about talking to Ajinkya and to Craig was not so much like the problems, but really just, they are two technical founders in the startup space they're going to be working with, sales organizations. And I have always been somebody who's just like very passionate about startups, business in general, like always curious on how you even get to that product market fit landscape. So like that's what kind of like brought me in, and then they, showed me the product. They asked me questions about like my current day-to-day, my workflows, my problems. And the biggest one that I was having was honestly like, I like to experiment a lot in my cold calls. I still do, and I was back then. And so I would always have like different talk tracks I would use for different scenarios. And what they did a really good job of was, building out these triggers is what they were called at the time. And so I would use those triggers to basically like understand like, when I get the no budget objection, I want to make sure that I say this in return instead of what I typically use. It would always help me to be like a reminder. And that way I could like, use it as like a flow in my calls. And that would just help me out like a lot, because I wouldn't have to do 5 calls and then realize, hey, I forgot that I told myself this morning I was going to use this opener. Or if I had a sticky note up on my computer and maybe like it fell down or I wasn't looking at it because I'm looking at my monitor, I always had Trellus there. And I was like one of those first people, Jim can tell you that I use it every single day and I loved it. And that's what got me like really involved. And I was like, I need to be part of this in some capacity. I'm not sure exactly how yet, but I do like it enough to be part of it. That's kind of how I got reeled in.
Love it. And I'm curious, you ended up from these initial calls, you asked a bunch of questions, you set the context questions, you asked a bunch of the kind of the pain questions.
Yep.
What were the kind of pain questions that helped you calibrate, hey, we're going to go after the cold call metric side of things?
Yeah. So I think the biggest part was, one, first, what is driving your pipeline? So I think that was, first calibrating. For most orgs at the time, what we had started seeing was they had noticed that cold calls or calling in general was actually starting to become a majority of where their pipeline was being sourced. This is probably circa like late 22. And the reason for that was, emails, as everyone knows, like AI emails have basically just like taken a total wash of the system. Yeah. And like, I don't know about your inbox, but my inbox is basically spam to the ends of the earth at this point. And I maybe see 1 or 2. And it's like, I notice your name. I know your brand, basically. It's nothing to do with the email. And so they noticed that their pipeline was starting to be secured from there. And there was just like existential worry that they hadn't focused enough attention on what was going on. And so like things we would ask, right, are, okay, do you know in the next 6 months where you're going to bring in the pipeline to reach your quota? Answer that you would usually get is, I think it's going to be around calling or like something to do with calling in general, because that's like where our trends are going. Like we don't think email is going to work for us. Cool. Question number 2, like, how confident do you feel that, what your current program and what you're doing, you're actually going to like be able to hit that quota? They're like, I have no idea. We're just kind of trying things out. Like, I haven't been trained on cold calling as much. We are just like doing this thing. We're just going to see what sticks. We don't really have a process in place. And I think for teams that were maybe like 3 reps, that wasn't a big deal. But as soon as you reach scale of like 10 plus reps, those managers started to worry a lot that they didn't have any like real process in place around making sure their call program worked or tracked properly. And so those kind of, of course we had like specific questions around like specific pains, like what do you not know about your cold calls? What do you wish that your reps did better, specifically around behaviors? What is like the outcome that you're hoping for? And like, those entangled would then drive a bunch of features that we would go and build. Yeah.
Gotcha. So you went and built some stuff. You got it in front of users. We were one of those users. What did you hear? I'd love to hear kind of what did you hear from users?
Yep. So this was kind of like a double-edged sword, right? Where we didn't have any data on like what was good coaching at the time. So we secretly needed a wedge about how to get into like just people's ecosystem so that we could learn. And the honest unlock there was real-time transcripts. So we effectively gave out like free real-time transcription to a bunch of people using like a PLG motion. You can add a Chrome extension. It works on your browser, on your dialer. And then using that, we like developed a user base that we could then go and like figure out coaching from. So that was like a secret hack for founders is find like a wedge for your product that doesn't really have to do with your product. Like people find value from like day one, and then you have what I call the right to learn. And so that was like how we started off. I think the second part, in terms of user feedback, what we learned around the coaching aspect, and this was probably brutal, and we're still like in the process of, making coaching like perfect and actually work properly, is as soon as a coaching suggestion is not good, humans tend to write off the coach, right? Like if you think about coaches you've had personally in your life, if they like give you coaching that is obviously wrong, you discount all their future opinions pretty strongly. Now, like that's how you do on a human. So when like an AI is telling you a suggestion, you discount it to like basically 0 when this occurs. And like that was a harsh lesson for us, which is, the suggestion may be good a couple of times, but like it gets something wrong, and then all of a sudden it's discounted and people like discontinue using it.
It's the trust jar analogy. It takes a long time to build up trust in the jar, but you screw up once, so you dump the jar out.
100%. And so that was like a big lesson for us. And we're still like, I think I wouldn't even say have solved it yet. Like we're still in the process of, we're getting better coaching. We're learning how coaching should be better. What are the aspects of a cold call you should focus on coaching rather than not? And like, there's a bunch of nuance there that we've like learned over the years, but that was like, challenge number 1, which is, hey, we have like this basic coaching thing. How does it experience? It's sort of like Dom's situation. There's a couple of triggers that are great for me, but when it's wrong, it's really wrong. And like, like you're hitting a voicemail and like that person's voicemail somehow indicates they're not interested. So our models at the time would tell you like, bring up, are they using another product? But you just hit a voicemail and you're like, this is the dumbest suggestion I could have ever gotten. And so, like we had to fight against a lot of that. And I think that ended up leading to, maybe it wasn't the right approach, but we took the approach, and we'll see if this bet plays out, which is building out a bunch of ecosystem of products around Trellus while the coaching got better, right? We knew that coaching is not going to get better like on the order of 1 week. It's going to take a lot of data. It's going to take a lot of nuance to figure that out. And so while we do that, let's make the whole system more valuable. So, AI summaries, AI emails, coaching after the fact, the whole like analytics system, so that you can access like what's going on in your cold calls. And while we were doing that, let's like make coaching better alongside it so that, we get to a situation where users stick around with the product, and then, the coaching just gets better. Because the worst thing that could happen for us is, everyone stopped using it because the coaching sucked. And then we just get back to square one like every couple of weeks because everyone stopped using it.
Yeah. Totally. So you built this wedge product around cold call coaching. It went okay. You had some revenue from it. We used it. And then you got to a decision that, hey, this is not the thing that we're going to do forever. So talk to me about how you got to that decision.
Yep. So it's pretty interesting. I think Dom joins the team. He can give you the quick rundown here, but the quick preview is Dom, you joined our team in like September or so.
September,
yeah. And then like, I think Dom, he comes into the office, And I remember him saying like, man, this thing has been hard to sell. Like the AI coach has been hard to sell. Like there's people who see value in it, they get it, but it's been hard to sell. And like to hit the revenue goals we want, we need to like think about really adding on another product layer potentially. At the time we didn't
ask
know
you a question.
Go for it.
So who was anybody selling before Dom? Like, was it you or was it Craig?
So we were, but we weren't like selling aggressively. And I guess the way we sort of approached it is we prioritized having a large user base over large revenue in the beginning. So like we didn't care so much to, be getting like hundreds of K in ARR and like only 100 users or something on the system. We cared way more like we'd rather have a world in the first year where we had 0 revenue, but like, 1,000 users. And like mostly because we wanted like a right to learn and we came from like no background of it. So that was like our initial goal, which is kind of like what ended up happening. But
how do you feel about that decision? Because I'll share a bit of context and then I'd love your feedback and then we'll throw to Dom.
Yeah.
I have a theory that they're not customers until they've actually given you some money. And I've experimented with a ton of free products and you do the customer development, you build a little thing, you give it them for free. And then the usage is terrible because you get a bunch of people that, just agreed to use it because it was free. I like to ask for a little bit of money so that at least there's some skin in the game. And then I'll get fewer, instead of 1,000 users, I'll get, 300 users, but I'll get 300 users that'll give me $5 a month, and I eventually want to charge $100. I'm curious, you all did it a different direction. How did that go? And then let's bring Dom into the story.
For sure. So I think the reason I don't particularly, I guess, regret it is I regret it to some extent. I don't fully regret it, but I regret it to some extent. I'll say measured approach. I think
you
in
learned,
the beginning,
right? You've
100%.
evolved.
Yeah. So I think in the beginning it was necessary just because we didn't have any like domain knowledge. Like we were literally at the time solving for I want to be in like 100 user system so I could learn what's going on. Like that was like we were like on the goal of like learning over like let's like make money off this product. I think what we deluded ourselves in early on is once we crossed say like the 200th user that was using it actively, we were like, hey, let's get to 1,000 instead of like let's charging for it. And I think that came from a place of nervousness, and that place of nervousness was because we knew the product wasn't good enough to charge for money, or maybe we felt that. And this I think is a problem a lot of first time founders fall into, which is you're very uncertain if this thing should be like charged money for or like significant cash for it. And so you don't charge for it. And then you get stuck on a treadmill of not doing that. Honestly, the big break in that was we brought Dom on and Dom was like, hey guys, and this is like to me and Craig, we just wanted like to build great software that a lot of people loved and used. And I think Dom's big push to us was like, let's charge significant money for this, like to make it worth our time. And like, I give him a lot of credit for like pushing us in that direction. But like the real honest answer is in the beginning it was necessary, but we probably deluded ourselves for like 6 months or so. And not doing it early enough.
I think it did bring a lot of goodwill though. A lot of people, on LinkedIn, everybody we talk to, they always tell us how like we give so much product out for free. Like it's unbelievable. The amount of like value they get, at least nowadays, right? With like our entire product suite. Of how much value they get from just like the free version of Trellus. And then once we, get them into the actual paid version of Trellus, they're like, wow, like this is even better, But yeah, I think it did build up a lot of like trust and goodwill with the sales community, just being able to be like a free product.
Yeah. I think there was another interesting also aspect to it. So one of the reasons like YC for context tells you to give like make people pay for products is to force usage. So like if you pay $100 for something, you're probably going to try using it rather than if you didn't, if that makes sense, right? Like if it's free, you're going to make
you're forcing a decision, right?
Exactly.
You're forcing them to make a decision, and you're only going to spend your time soliciting feedback from people that actually use the product that are willing to pay a meaningless amount of money.
Yeah.
But if they're not willing to pay for it, you probably don't want their feedback.
Yep, 100%. So I think for us, like the reason I guess maybe we didn't start charging early enough, and this is maybe in hindsight like the wrong decision, but the way we rationalized it at the time, which is maybe helpful for founders who are listening to this and using the same rationale, and like maybe they shouldn't, is we were like, okay, Trellis, the way it works is it's always on. Like you have to literally remove the Chrome extension for it to not be on, and for it to not pop up and take up like a third of your screen, right? Like while the whole widget pops up. Mm-hmm. And so the perspective we took is like, people paying money isn't going to change their usage of Trellis itself. They're still going to use it. We're probably still going to get like reasonable amounts of feedback. So let's like increase that like volume of feedback we can get. And the advice, I guess, maybe YC had only given was charge in the beginning so that they use your product more so than charge in the beginning to learn if they'll pay for it, which is interesting. I don't know if I fully agree with that advice, but that was kind of, the direction we came from. Looking back, I'd have probably started charging 6 months earlier than we did.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, cool. I want to throw it to Dom now because this is kind of where Dom enters the story.
Yep.
And you started selling. Us salespeople got to earn commission, and if we can't sell shit, then there's no commission check. So help me understand your kind of journey here at Trellis, and then we could jump into like the pivot and how that happened.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like I mentioned before, the first initial way I got involved was Ajinkya reached out to me on LinkedIn. I was one of those SDR that he was looking for feedback from. I got involved in like the feedback loop pretty early on while the product was still very young, and I started using it every day, and I enjoyed using it to the point where, I reached out to Ajinkya one day and was like, hey, I see you guys are growing in terms of like product. I want to be able to be part of like the journey and help out in terms of like the revenue side of things. And so I got involved, I started really getting involved in late August, early September. And then we had a team outing, bonding session in New York in like the HQ office. I think it was around like October or so. And yeah, I mean, Ajinkya and Craig, they both were just watching me do my daily, workflows and my daily calls and hopping on, demos and discos and all that good stuff. And I got to a point where I said to him, like, it's hard to sell this product, the way it is right now. And the same day I was doing some cold calling and I was using a parallel dialer at the time. And it was just like a really hard experience. I won't say what I was using, but I just didn't really enjoy the experience at all. It was a bit buggy. And even like Craig mentioned, like, hey, like what's going on, right? Then I had Craig start doing it, start making cold calls from the same platform using Trellis on the side. And he was like, yeah, like this isn't great. And that's where like the idea of like the auto dialer came up with. A lot of the issues I was having was that I didn't like how it was a separate platform. Yeah, because I was using Outreach and I was using a separate platform to do my dialing. I wasn't saying where my data was. There was a lot of like bugginess to it, like I said before. And so we, just came up with this half-baked idea where Ajinkya then took out a big marker and started scribbling on the whiteboard and was like, all right, what if we do this, this, and that? And then like it, just explosion happened. And then
Charlie Day moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it was a great moment because it was like, at least in my mind, and I'm not sure about you, Ajinkya, but in my mind, I was like, maybe this is the key to getting out of this funk.
Yep. I think
can we dwell on the funk? Yeah, because I do want to get into the challenge, but I think for our sales folks that are listening, that might resonate with the situation that you were in. Dom, like you had something to sell. Was it Ajinkya and Craig? Were they telling you, hey, we have product market fit? Like we have this product. You have a product. You have customers. You have air quotes product market fit, but it's not really strong product market fit. It's an uphill slog to try and get there.
Ajinkya and Craig were very upfront with me. They were like, Dom, this is a very risky thing you're doing in your career. You have to think hard about this move because this is a state of where we are in our current startup. If you want to be part of it, great, but you're going to be taking a pay cut. It's going to be long hours. It's going to be a lot of hard work, and we might fail. And I was like, okay, cool. Sounds like it's up my alley. Let's do it. So
here's a bad idea. You want to do it.
That was basically, I think I told Dom like 3 times before he signed, being like, hey man, just so you know, like, if we don't make this revenue goal, we die.
Yep.
And then like, cool. You want to put that on your shoulders. And then we just I think we just iterated and he was good with it. Yeah.
So from a product market fit perspective, did you all think you had product market fit at the time when you were trying to sell this? Were you still open to the idea that tell me how you were thinking about that.
Yeah, I think honestly, so from the product market fit side, it always felt like when we were selling the AI coach, it would be to like what like they call them like that traditional adoption cycle, like the early adopters who were really excited about AI. They were like, let me try what's like new. Let me see what's there. And I think the thing that always, struck me and Craig is you ever hit someone who's like in that middle adoption cycle, like you talk to any of those personas, they're always like, yeah, let me see if it like plays out for the next guy before I get this thing. And to me, that was just such a red flag for like building a company, which is, I could make a long-term bet. It's like, I guess if you're building Coinbase, this is the bet that like Brian Armstrong made, that like that middle section would eventually buy crypto, and they did. So like he was fine. But in our tail end, I think when you're building SaaS, it is a bad bet to make if your software is only going to be bought if like the early adopters are finding like 100x success from it, and like the middle adopters are just like, they're not even going to consider like purchasing it at the time. I think to me that was like number one red flag. So I wouldn't say we knew we didn't have product market fit. I think when we told Dom, we were like, we don't have PMF. We have a product. We've had people who are early adopters of this product. It's going to be a lot of changes. We're open to it. The one thing me and Craig for sure are stubborn on is we were like, we're not leaving the cold calling space. That was like one thing me and Craig learned through our pivot journey is, grass is always greener on the other end. You can always see another product space, another thing like that. Like, life must be so easy there, but it sucks everywhere. Like that's the real answer. Like it's painful. It's a grind everywhere. But it's like, that's the fun of it. And so our one rule was we're not leaving cold calling. We're going to do AI things. Mm-hmm. But like, if the AI coach doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, and we will find another idea if we have to. Mm-hmm. And then I think it's like Dom's point, when your back is truly up against the wall and you are like at existential mode of like, hey, like I feel like writing's on the wall. We're not going to hit like the revenue goals. That's when I think like actual like cool ideas come out. So I'm very pro startups not having like 10 years of cushy runway to figure their things out. They should be like short time frames of you are just like absolutely freaked out about how to succeed.
Yeah, fair enough. It creates the because I remember the conversations, just having been on the other side of this, a lot of companies kind of in that stage of like where Dom was, he's struggling. I remember having conversations with founders and their salespeople, and the founders were like, yeah, we got super strong product market fit and like $10 million in the bank, and we got 24 or 36 months in the bank. I talked to one guy who raised $100 million off $1 million in ARR. I'm like, so they've got infinite.
That's wild.
Yeah, infinite.
He makes more money on his treasury return than he does on his revenue at that point.
I was talking to him afterwards, and he said the exact same thing. It's nuts. And there's a huge difference between in startups now than they were 3 years ago. 3 years ago, you had people with like weak product market fit scaling up. Dom saying, "Hey, this is such a struggle. I'm trying to push a wet noodle up a hill," and the founder's like, "Let's just dump gasoline on it because we just want to grow."
Yep.
How did you get from kind of where you were at to, you had that moment of like Ajinkya scribbling on the whiteboard, moving into, okay, this is the new thing we're going to build. Was it just like, hey, we're going to build this, we're going to solve this problem for Dom? Did you do some other customer development? Help me understand what happened next.
So what ended up happening there is, okay, so I remember Craig and I, we drew a bunch of things on the whiteboard and we're like, all right, here's the workflow. We think we can actually solve all of these secretly. And then I think I had like another big project that was going on. So I was like, let me complete this. Let me finish it off in a week. And then at some point I had downtime. So I think it was over a weekend or something. I'm like, let me, just spend the whole day seeing if I can like secretly make this product work. So we did that. We then, honestly, the real thing is if you're not like dog fooding your own product, it's impossible to know. And we just had Dom who was like placing cold calls like all the time. So we were like, all right, let me build out the beta. Let me give it to Dom. Let's like just see the empirical results. Like we can like just time him how much more dials he does, like, how much more effective he is. And I think, we had an intuition it was reasonable. I think when Dom used it, he was like, yeah, I think this is going to work. And then we started, just giving it to very like people close in our network who had been using Trellus for a while, and giving it to them. And I think this is when we learned the hard lesson: don't give things out for free. Like we knew this at this point, like to not do that. And so in a weird way, like all these people who we've given out software for free for like 2 years for, the auto dialer is now pay gated. And so to them, like it was like an interesting alternative of like, now we've built up this like user base, but if you have a new product, it's actually possible to go sell it to those free users at that point. And so that was kind of the approach we ended up taking, from it. But yeah, it was mostly just like experiment. We didn't really know if it'll work. We threw it to Dom and he was like, yeah, it does a thing. That's
the thing you said it was going to do.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. That must have been a great moment. Like, hey, I can ditch this other parallel power dialer, because we've tested a bunch of them and we're using one, and I think we still have Trellus plugged in as well. But like some of the early, not Trellus, but some of the other parallel dialers were kind of janky. And like if you look at the connection, or when a prospect picks up and when your rep gets connected, I mean, I saw some that were 5 seconds long.
Yep.
And it was because of the parallel dialing technology and the weightiness of the complexity of doing that. It was really hard.
And I think other interesting things, right? Like, and then you start from like this, the founder mindset of like analyzing like the business economics of running these sorts of companies. I think the big thing we realized is if you build a dialer company, your big danger is your costs on like a long-term horizon of 10 years aren't going down. And the reason for that is your main cost in a lot of those companies is you're paying like AT&T, like Twilio, like some fixed rate that is owned by a cartel of, carrier companies. And unless they are literally putting more telephone networks up like in the ground, that cost is not going to be significantly like reduced year on year. And so we didn't want to be in the business of providing a dialer. We wanted to be in the business of like automating everything around it. Because like if you're using AI models, your costs are like probably on the 10-year horizon, like dropping by a factor of 10x. And so that was like also where like a lot of the meta analysis of like the aha moment came in, where maybe it's like self-rationalizing why it's a good idea, but that was part of it, the excitement.
On process, it's helpful to hear your thought process through here.
Yep. Sorry, I might have missed. Yep.
No, go ahead. I was just saying, it's okay to like. I'm asking you to help me understand your thinking. So we're not saying, hey, this is a professor of product market fit and that transition. Nobody is that, because it's always messy. There's like the air quotes right way to do things, and then there's the startup way, which is like just whatever the fuck works. And you've got to head in the right direction, but the path to get there is going to be crazy.
Yeah, and then I think the first few inklings, I would say, okay, so I guess there were a couple of big aha moments with the new product. The first one is, okay, so there was a team that we were trialing with. They had a bunch of stuff go on internally, so like budgets got froze. So we like ended their trial, but then the reps paid out of pocket to use Trellus, like the auto dialer specifically. And like on the AI coaching product, that had never happened before. That was just like
nice,
never had happened. And so like it was just like such a market difference in like that part. The second part, and me and Dom talk about this all the time, the calls we used to have in September were always around, discovery, trials, like stuff like that. The calls we have nowadays are like, what's the seat price? What's the, who should the contract go to? It's just like a different sort of conversation you're having. And I think that part to us, we're not a product market fit by any means, but you feel closer towards the promised land of whatever it is. And so we're inching towards it, hopefully.
Dom, I'd love to hear from you. So what's the difference of the sales conversation? I know Ajinkya gave some hints there. Faster, slower, easier, harder, deeper, wider.
Faster, definitely. Easier, yeah, I'd say so as well. I think the auto dialer product and the whole Trellis suite now, like all the products that we have just like made Ajinkya and I better salespeople. And the reason why I say that is because we're being very like strategic and like conservative with our time now. Like before, we would spend a lot of time with like really small teams, where we our ACV was not going to be that high anyways. We were spending a lot of time with them, giving them like extended trials, like month over month. It was crazy to think about, coming from like a mature SaaS organization, I was selling some stuff back, it was different. But no, I think it made us better sellers because we became like very, I wouldn't say cutthroat, but cut out all the bullshit, like let's get down to brass tacks, like do the discovery process. This discovery never ends, in my opinion. Like discovery takes the entire, sales cycle and then some too, putting my CS hat on. But no, I mean, we did a lot of discovery. We got down to the deep pain points, impact of pain, consequences, and all that good stuff. But we also just like stayed very straightforward with them. Like, hey guys, like, this is your trial. You have 1 week. Then tell us if you like it or not. We like, at least from my perspective, I feel a lot better about selling the auto dialer and including it with the whole Trellis package of the suite of tools, right? Because it's just like, it's such a great product, in my opinion, but I'm biased, obviously.
Yeah. I think one thing I'll sort of add, and I give Dom a lot of credit to this, is when you're a founder and you've had maybe your first 3 sales, each of them feels like a fluke. I will say, like, all the first 3, maybe the first 5 sales we ever made as a company, I felt were total flukes. I was like, I don't know how that happened. Me and Craig would Slack each other being like, well, that's crazy that happened. But when you get closer towards territory where you're having like, tens of deals or, even more on that order happening every single month, the pattern recognition that you start getting is, extremely strong. So you will start, as Dom said, you won't like waste time in meetings where it's super obvious you're with someone who doesn't have power, who like cannot make the decision.
Yeah.
And so you don't take those calls anymore. So kind of that whole, aspect of things changed for us as they say, pipeline cures all problems. And so, that's kind of what felt like started happening.
Yeah. I give some credit to my mentor because, Bant, obviously, I'm sure you've heard of it, Collin, right? Bant is the go-to traditional aspect of like qualifying, right? And a lot of people give it, a bad rep because they're like, Bant does not even get close to like the actual pain that this customer is having, or gets deep enough, right? And I think we found some sort of like hybrid there where it's like, let's never forget that we need to know about the pains our customers are having to even be able to address them. But also, let's not just be blind, like, let's not be like a little kid in a candy shop. Are we talking to the person we need to be talking to? If not, how do we get to them? What's the time horizon here? We can't be spending, 2 months on a deal that's going to give us 10% of what our average ACV is. It's just not ideal, and it's not